Sarah Martinez stepped off the military transport bus at Camp Pendleton, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder and determination burning in her dark eyes. At 22, she was smaller than most of the male recruits around her, standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall with a slender build that made her look even younger than her years. The California sun beat down mercilessly as she joined the line of new arrivals, each one eager to prove themselves worthy of wearing the Marine uniform. The drill instructors immediately began their intimidating welcome routine, shouting orders and sizing up the fresh recruits. Sarah kept her chin up and her back straight, refusing to show any sign of weakness even as sweat began to bead on her forehead. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl watching her father polish his military medals at the kitchen table. Her father, Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, had served 3 tours overseas before a roadside bomb ended his career and left him with a permanent limp. He had never explicitly encouraged Sarah to join the military, but his stories of brotherhood, honor, and serving something greater than oneself had planted seeds that grew into an unshakable resolve. When she announced her decision to enlist, he had simply nodded and said, "Make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, mija." The first few weeks of basic training were exactly as brutal as Sarah had expected. The physical demands pushed her body to its limits, but she had spent years preparing, running miles every morning before her job at the local gym, and lifting weights until her muscles screamed for mercy. What she hadn't fully prepared for was the psychological warfare that came from some of her fellow recruits. A group of 6 Marines, led by a cocky recruit named Jake Morrison from Texas, seemed to take particular pleasure in making Sarah's life miserable. Morrison was everything Sarah wasn't: tall, broad-shouldered, and blessed with the kind of natural athleticism that made physical challenges look effortless. He had grown up hunting and fishing, and his father owned a successful construction company. To him, Sarah represented everything wrong with the modern military's push for inclusion. "Look at the little princess trying to keep up," Morrison would whisper during formation, just loud enough for his buddies to hear, but quiet enough to avoid the drill instructor's attention. "Bet she's already crying herself to sleep every night." His crew of followers, Thompson, Rivera, Walsh, Kowalski, and Barnes, would snicker and add their own comments. They made sure Sarah heard every word, timing their harassment perfectly to avoid getting caught by the training staff. During meals, they would make exaggerated crying motions when she walked past their table. During physical training, they would intentionally crowd her during exercises, making snide remarks about her form or her pace. Sarah gritted her teeth and endured it all in silence. She had dealt with bullies before, starting in middle school when kids made fun of her for being the daughter of a disabled veteran. Her father had taught her that the best response to ignorance was excellence, and she threw herself into every aspect of training with fierce determination. While Morrison and his friends spent their free time bragging about their exploits back home, Sarah studied tactics manuals and practiced her marksmanship. She memorized every piece of equipment, every protocol, every detail that might give her an edge. Her drill instructors began to notice her dedication, and slowly other recruits started to respect her quiet competence. But Morrison's group only intensified their campaign of harassment. They began calling her Princess constantly, turning the nickname into a weapon designed to undermine her confidence. They would comment on her appearance, suggest she belonged in a beauty pageant instead of a military base, and question whether she had what it took to handle real combat situations. The breaking point came during a particularly challenging obstacle course exercise. Sarah had been pushing herself hard, determined to improve her time from the previous week. As she approached the rope climb, Morrison deliberately stepped into her path. "Careful there, Princess," he said with a smirk. "Wouldn't want you to break a nail." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she said nothing, moving around him to begin her climb. As she reached for the rope, Morrison's voice carried clearly across the training area. "Try not to cry when you fall, Princess. Some of us are trying to train for real war here." The laughter from his group felt like needles against Sarah's skin, but she channeled her anger into pure focus, scaling the rope faster than she ever had before. When she dropped back to the ground, she finally turned to face Morrison directly. "Is there something you'd like to say to me?" she asked quietly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Morrison's grin widened. "Just wondering when you're going to realize this isn't the place for little girls playing dress-up. But don't worry, Princess, I'm sure you'll figure it out soon enough." That night, as Sarah lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, She made a decision that would change everything. She was done being anyone's victim, and she was ready to show Morrison and his friends exactly what kind of person they had chosen to mess with. The next morning brought news that would reshape Sarah's entire military trajectory. Gunnery Sergeant Williams, a battle-hardened Marine with 3 Purple Hearts and a reputation for spotting exceptional talent, approached her during morning formation with an unexpected proposition. "Martinez," he barked, his weathered face revealing nothing. "You've been selected for evaluation for the Marine Raider Assessment and Selection Program. You interested in finding out what you're really made of?" Sarah's heart nearly stopped. The Marine Raiders were the elite of the elite, the modern evolution of the legendary Marine Force reconnaissance units that her father had told her stories about during her childhood. These were the Marines who conducted the most dangerous missions, operating behind enemy lines with minimal support and maximum lethality. The selection process was notoriously brutal, with failure rates exceeding 90%. "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant," she replied without hesitation, her voice strong and clear. William studied her for a long moment, his steel-gray eyes seeming to look straight through her. "The assessment starts in 6 weeks. Until then, you'll be on a specialized training regimen. Fair warning, what you've been doing here will feel like summer camp compared to what's coming. You sure about this?" "Absolutely, Gunnery Sergeant." As Williams walked away, Sarah caught sight of Morrison and his crew watching from across the training yard. The contempt on their faces was unmistakable, and she could practically hear their thoughts. They saw her selection for Raider assessment as some kind of diversity initiative, another example of the military lowering standards to accommodate women. Morrison wasted no time in making his opinions known. During the lunch break, he cornered Sarah near the mess hall, his 5 friends forming a semicircle around her like a pack of wolves. Well, Princess," Morrison drawled, his Texas accent thick with mockery. "Heard you got yourself a golden ticket to Raider tryouts. Must be nice having the brass hand you opportunities the rest of us have to earn." Thompson, a stocky recruit from Chicago, chimed in with a cruel laugh. "Bet they need to fill their girl quota. Can't have the Raiders looking too masculine, right?" Sarah felt her temper flare but kept her expression neutral. "Maybe they just want Marines who can actually shoot straight," she replied calmly. "I've seen your range scores, Morrison. Even with all that hunting experience you keep bragging about, you're barely qualifying." Morrison's face flushed red, and his friends shifted uncomfortably. It was true. Despite his boasts about growing up with guns, his marksmanship scores were consistently average at best. Sarah, meanwhile, had been scoring in the top 5% of their training class. "Lucky shots," Morrison spat. "Let's see how tough you are when the real pressure starts. Raiders don't want some crying little girl who can't handle the heat." "The only person who seems to be getting emotional here is you," Sarah observed, her voice steady and cool. "If you spent half as much energy on your training as you do on running your mouth, maybe you'd have gotten selected too." The insult hit home, and Morrison took a threatening step forward. "You think you're better than us, don't you, Princess? Think your daddy's war stories and your pretty little shooting scores make you special?" Sarah didn't back down an inch. "I think I focus on being the best Marine I can be instead of wasting time trying to tear down other people." "Maybe you should try it sometime." Rivera, usually the quietest of the group, spoke up with venom in his voice. "We'll see how special you are when you wash out in the first week. Raiders don't need dead weight, and that's all you'll ever be." "Then I guess we'll find out, won't we?" Sarah replied, meeting each of their stares in turn. "But right now I need to get back to training. Some of us actually care about being ready." As she walked away, she heard Morrison's voice behind her, loud enough for several other recruits to hear. "Enjoy your free ride while it lasts, Princess. When you come crawling back here with your tail between your legs, don't expect any sympathy from real Marines." Sarah didn't turn around, but Morrison's words followed her like a dark cloud. She knew that word of her Raider selection would spread quickly through the base, and not everyone would see it as the honor it truly was. Some would assume, like Morrison, that she was getting special treatment because of her gender. Others might question whether she had the physical and mental toughness required for such an elite unit. That afternoon, Sarah received her new training schedule, and her heart sank as she read through the requirements. Her days would now begin at 400 with an hour of intensive physical conditioning, followed by advanced weapons training, tactical exercises, and specialized combat scenarios. She would be training alongside a small group of other Raider candidates, all of whom had already completed basic training. and had years of operational experience. When she arrived at the advanced training facility the next morning, she realized just how far behind she truly was. The other candidates were all seasoned Marines, some with combat deployments under their belts. They moved with the confidence and efficiency that came from years of military service, while Sarah was still trying to prove herself worthy of basic respect. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, the Raider instructor assigned to oversee the pre-assessment training, made it clear from the first day that he expected nothing less than perfection. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the group of 12 candidates, "you are here because someone believes you might have what it takes to join the most elite fighting force in the Marine Corps. I am here to prove them wrong. My job is to find your breaking point and push you past it. Some of you will rise to the challenge. Most of you will fail. Martinez, you're starting about 3 steps behind everyone else here. I suggest you find a way to catch up quickly." Sarah nodded grimly, understanding the challenge ahead of her. Not only did she need to prove herself worthy of the Raiders, but she had to do it while carrying the extra burden of being the only woman in the program and the least experienced candidate in the group. Every mistake would be magnified, every success questioned. But as she looked around at her fellow candidates, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: excitement instead of dread. For the first time since arriving at Camp Pendleton, she was surrounded by Marines who were focused on excellence rather than harassment. These men didn't care about her gender or her background. They only cared about whether she could perform when it mattered. Morrison and his friends had no idea what they had unleashed. Their constant harassment had forged Sarah's determination into something unbreakable, and now she had the chance to transform that determination into deadly skill. The next 6 weeks pushed Sarah beyond every limit she thought she had. Sergeant Rodriguez proved to be exactly as demanding as he had promised, designing training scenarios that seemed specifically crafted to exploit each candidate's weaknesses. For Sarah, that meant constant tests of her physical strength and endurance, areas where her smaller stature put her at a natural disadvantage. Every morning began with a brutal physical conditioning session that left even the most experienced Marines gasping for breath. Sarah learned to ignore the burning in her lungs and the screaming protest from her muscles, focusing instead on the rhythm of her movements and the goal ahead of her. When the other candidates were doing 50 push-ups, she did 75. When they ran 5 miles, she added an extra mile during her personal time. The weapons training revealed Sarah's natural talents in ways that surprised even Rodriguez. Her marksmanship scores consistently topped the group, and she demonstrated an intuitive understanding of tactics that impressed the veteran instructors. More importantly, she began to earn the grudging respect of her fellow candidates, who saw her dedication and refused to give special treatment based on her gender. Corporal Jenkins, a soft-spoken Marine from North Carolina with 2 combat deployments, became Sarah's unofficial mentor during the intensive training period. He had initially been skeptical about training alongside a woman, but Sarah's work ethic and skill gradually won him over. "You've got something most of these guys don't," he told her one evening as they cleaned their weapons after a particularly challenging urban warfare exercise. "You've got that hunger. Most of us are here because we think we're already badass. You're here because you know you've got something to prove, and that makes you dangerous." Sarah appreciated Jenkins' support, but she also knew that her real test would come during the actual Raider assessment and selection. The pre-training was just preparation for 3 weeks of hell designed to break down candidates both physically and mentally. Only the strongest would survive to earn the coveted Raider tab. Meanwhile, Morrison and his crew continued their campaign of harassment whenever they crossed paths with Sarah on the base. Their taunts had evolved from simple name-calling to more sophisticated psychological warfare. They would make comments about her family, suggest that her father would be ashamed of her failures, and create elaborate fantasies about her inevitable washout from the Raider program. "Heard they're already planning your going-away party, Princess," Morrison said one evening as Sarah walked past their table in the mess hall. "Don't worry. We'll make sure to save you some cake for when you come crawling back." Walsh, a recruit from New Jersey with a cruel streak, added his own twist. "My brother went through Raider selection 2 years ago. Said they made the candidates do things that would make grown men cry. Wonder how long it'll take before our little princess breaks down completely." Sarah had learned to tune out most of their comments, but this particular exchange stuck with her, not because it hurt her feelings, but because it reminded her of something important. Morrison and his friends had no idea what real pressure looked like. They thought basic training was tough, but they had never been pushed to their absolute breaking point and forced to find strength they didn't know they possessed. The night before Raider assessment began, Sarah called her father from a payphone outside the barracks. His voice was warm and familiar, a comfort she desperately needed before facing the unknown challenges ahead. "How are you feeling, Mija?" he asked, and she could hear the concern in his voice despite his attempts to sound casual. "Scared," she admitted honestly, "but ready. I think I'm as prepared as I can be." "Fear is good," her father replied. "Fear keeps you alert and keeps you alive. Your mother and I are proud of you no matter what happens. But remember what I always told you. The strongest people aren't the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who get back up every single time." When Sarah hung up the phone, she felt centered in a way she hadn't experienced in months. Whatever happened over the next 3 weeks, she would face it with the strength her father had taught her and the skills she had earned through months of relentless preparation. The Raider assessment began at 300 on a Monday morning, with a phone call that jolted Sarah from a deep sleep. The voice on the other end was cold and mechanical. "Martinez, you have 15 minutes to report to Building 347 with your full kit. Do not be late." Sarah's heart pounded as she threw on her uniform and grabbed her gear. This was it, the beginning of the most challenging experience of her life. As she jogged across the base in the pre-dawn darkness, she passed Morrison and several other basic training recruits heading to their own morning formation. Morrison caught sight of her and called out mockingly, "See you later, princess. Try not to embarrass the Corps too much." For the first time in months, Sarah smiled at Morrison's taunt. He had no idea that his constant harassment had actually made her stronger, forging her determination into something unbreakable. While he and his friends had been wasting energy on bullying and posturing, she had been transforming herself into something far more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. Building 347 turned out to be a nondescript concrete structure that Sarah had never noticed before. Inside, she found 11 other candidates, all looking nervous but determined. Sergeant Rodriguez stood at the front of the room, his expression unreadable. "Gentlemen and lady," he began, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Welcome to hell. For the next 3 weeks, we will test every aspect of your physical, mental, and emotional strength. We will push you beyond your limits and then push you further. Most of you will fail. Those who succeed will join the most elite fighting force in the world." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "The first exercise begins now. You have 30 seconds to get outside and form up for the initial fitness assessment. Move." Sarah sprinted toward the door with the other candidates, her mind already shifting into the focused, determined state that had carried her through months of preparation. Behind them, Rodriguez's voice followed like thunder. "Welcome to the rest of your lives." As they lined up in the cool morning air, Sarah caught sight of Jenkins giving her an encouraging nod. She was no longer the inexperienced recruit who had stepped off the bus at Camp Pendleton months earlier. She was a warrior in the making, tempered by adversity and ready to prove herself worthy of the Raider tab that seemed impossibly far away. The Raider assessment and selection proved to be every bit as brutal as Sarah had expected, and worse than anything she could have imagined. The first week alone eliminated 6 of the 12 candidates, including 2 Marines with years of combat experience who simply couldn't handle the relentless physical and psychological pressure. Sarah survived through a combination of stubborn determination and the mental toughness she had developed during months of harassment from Morrison and his crew. When instructors screamed in her face during stress positions, she thought about Morrison's cruel laughter. When her body wanted to quit during endless physical challenges, she remembered every snide comment about her being weak and worthless. The training was designed to simulate the worst possible conditions Marines might face in actual combat operations. Candidates were deprived of sleep, pushed through grueling physical exercises in all weather conditions, and subjected to realistic combat scenarios that tested their decision-making abilities under extreme stress. During one particularly challenging exercise, Sarah found herself leading a team of 3 other candidates through a simulated hostage rescue mission. The scenario involved navigating through a building filled with instructors playing hostile forces, locating mock hostages, and neutralizing threats while avoiding civilian casualties. Sarah's tactical thinking and marksmanship skills proved decisive in the exercise's success, earning grudging praise from the notoriously hard-to-please instructors. Martinez, Sergeant Rodriguez said after the exercise, his tone as neutral as always. That was textbook execution. Keep it up. Coming from Rodriguez, those few words felt like the highest honor Sarah had ever received. She was beginning to believe that she might actually have what it took to earn the Raider tab. The second week brought psychological evaluations and stress tests designed to identify candidates who might break under the extreme pressures of special operations missions. Sarah endured hours of interrogation techniques, sensory deprivation, and scenarios designed to trigger claustrophobia and panic responses. Through it all, she maintained her composure by focusing on her breathing and remembering her father's advice about finding strength in adversity. By the beginning of the third week, only 4 candidates remained: Sarah, Jenkins, a Marine named Peterson from Idaho, and Ramirez, a tough-as-nails veteran from Los Angeles with 2 Purple Hearts. The final week would determine which of them, if any, would earn the right to call themselves Raiders. The culminating exercise was a 72-hour field operation that combined everything they had learned during the assessment. The 4 candidates were dropped into a remote training area with minimal equipment and given a series of objectives to complete while being hunted by a full Marine platoon, acting as opposing forces. Sarah's team performed flawlessly during the first 36 hours, successfully completing 2 reconnaissance missions and neutralizing several mock enemy positions. But exhaustion and sleep deprivation were taking their toll, and small mistakes began to accumulate. During the second night, Peterson made a navigation error that led the team into an ambush scenario. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a minor setback, but in their exhausted state, the team's response was slow and uncoordinated. The instructors ended the exercise and gathered the 4 candidates for immediate evaluation. Rodriguez's expression was grimmer than usual as he addressed them. Peterson, you're done. Pack your gear and report to the transportation office. Jenkins, Ramirez, Martinez, you've earned the right to wear the Raider tab. Congratulations. Sarah felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. 3 weeks of hell had ended with the greatest achievement of her military career. She was now officially a Marine Raider, part of the most elite fighting force in the Corps. But her celebration was short-lived. As the newly minted Raiders prepared to leave the training area, Rodriguez pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. Martinez, you've proven yourself here, but the real test starts now. You're going to face challenges that have nothing to do with your abilities as a Marine. Some people will always see you as a diversity hire, no matter how much you accomplish. Don't let them get in your head. Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She had proven herself capable of operating at the highest levels of military excellence, but she knew that some people would never accept her achievements as legitimate. When Sarah returned to Camp Pendleton 2 days later, word of her success had already spread throughout the base. The reaction was mixed. Some Marines congratulated her genuinely, recognizing the significance of her achievement, while others whispered about lowered standards and political correctness. Morrison and his crew fell squarely into the second category. When Sarah walked into the mess hall for her first meal back at the base, she found them waiting for her with expressions of undisguised contempt. Well, if it isn't our newest Special Forces hero," Morrison said loudly enough for half the mess hall to hear. "Tell me, Princess, how many standards did they have to lower for you to squeak through?" Sarah set down her tray and turned to face Morrison with the cold, calculating expression she had learned during Raider training. For the first time since arriving at Camp Pendleton, she felt completely in control of the situation. Actually, Morrison, the standards were exactly the same. 9 out of 12 candidates washed out, including 2 Marines with combat experience. But I'm curious, when are you planning to try out for Raiders? Or are you more comfortable staying here where things are safe and easy? Morrison's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. I don't need some fake qualification to prove I'm a real Marine. Unlike some people here, I earned my place the right way. The right way? Sarah's voice carried a dangerous edge that made several nearby Marines stop their conversations to listen. You mean the way where you spend more time harassing other Marines than improving yourself? The way where your marksmanship scores barely qualify and your leadership evaluations are consistently below average? The mess hall had grown noticeably quieter, and Morrison realized he was losing the confrontation in front of an audience. His face twisted with rage as he stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. You think that little tab makes you better than us? He snarled. You're still just a weak little girl playing soldier. When this diversity experiment ends, you'll be right back where you belong. Sarah smiled coldly, her raider training having given her a confidence that Morrison couldn't shake. We'll see about that. But right now, I have real training to get back to. Some of us have actual responsibilities. As she picked up her tray to leave, Morrison made the mistake that would change everything. Run along, princess. Try not to get anyone killed when they send you somewhere you don't belong. Sarah stopped and turned back to Morrison, her expression deadly serious. You know what, Morrison? I'm tired of your mouth. You think you're so tough? Prove it. The challenge hung in the air like electricity before a storm. The mess hall had gone completely silent, with every Marine present recognizing that something significant was about to happen. Morrison's eyes widened slightly as he realized Sarah wasn't backing down, but his pride wouldn't let him retreat in front of so many witnesses. What exactly are you suggesting, princess? Morrison asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the obvious tension in his body. Sarah's smile was cold as winter steel. Combat training exercise. You and your 5 buddies against me. Full gear, paintball rounds, capture the flag scenario. We'll see who really belongs here. The suggestion sent a ripple of excitement through the watching Marines. Combat exercises between different units were common. But a challenge like this, 1 female raider against 6 basic training Marines, was unprecedented. Morrison looked around at his crew, seeing the expectation in their eyes. He had spent months building himself up as the alpha male of their group, and backing down now would destroy his reputation completely. You're serious? Thompson asked incredulously. 6 against 1? That's not exactly fair odds. Sarah's laugh was sharp and humorless. You're right. Maybe I should ask for a handicap to make it more challenging. Morrison's face went dark red with fury. Fine. You want to get embarrassed in front of the whole base? Let's do it. Tomorrow, 0800 hours at the training facility. We'll show everyone what happens when reality meets fantasy. Word of the challenge spread through Camp Pendleton like wildfire. By evening, it seemed like every Marine on the base had heard about the upcoming confrontation between the newly minted female raider and Morrison's crew. Betting pools formed in barracks across the facility, with opinions sharply divided about the likely outcome. Sergeant Rodriguez sought out Sarah that evening, his expression concerned. Martinez, you sure about this? You've got nothing to prove to those idiots and everything to lose if something goes wrong. Sarah shook her head firmly. With respect, Sergeant, I have everything to prove. These guys have been making my life hell for months, and they're never going to stop until someone shows them consequences. Besides, this isn't about proving anything to them. It's about proving something to myself. Rodriguez studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. But remember, raiders don't fight angry. We fight smart. Use your training, not your emotions. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with a crowd of Marines gathering around the training facility before 0800. Word had even reached the officer corps, and several lieutenants and captains positioned themselves where they could observe the exercise without appearing to officially sanction it. Sarah arrived precisely on time, wearing full combat gear and carrying her weapons with the easy confidence of someone who had earned the right to use them. She looked calm and focused, showing none of the nervous energy that might be expected before such a confrontation. Morrison and his crew arrived 5 minutes later, their bravado from the previous day somewhat diminished by the reality of facing a trained raider in actual combat conditions. They had spent the evening talking themselves up and planning strategies, but seeing Sarah's professional demeanor made them realize they might have bitten off more than they could chew. The exercise parameters were simple. 2 teams, 1 flag each. First team to capture the opposing flag and return it to their base wins. The training area was a mock urban environment with multiple buildings, obstacles, and concealment opportunities. Sarah would start from the north end, Morrison's team from the south. As the Marines took their positions, Jenkins approached Sarah one final time. Remember what we learned about urban combat, he said quietly. Use the environment, control the engagement distance, and don't give them any chances to use their numbers advantage. Sarah nodded, checking her gear one last time. The paintball rounds were designed to simulate real ammunition, and hits to vital areas would effectively eliminate participants from the exercise. She had studied the training facility layout during her months of preparation, and she knew every corner, every sightline, every tactical advantage the terrain offered. The starting signal echoed across the training area, and both teams immediately moved into action. Morrison's strategy was predictable: use their numerical superiority to advance in a coordinated line and overwhelm Sarah through sheer firepower. It was exactly what Sarah had expected, and exactly what her raider training had prepared her to counter. Instead of defending her flag position, Sarah immediately went on the offensive, using her superior knowledge of urban combat tactics to outmaneuver Morrison's group. She moved through the training facility like a ghost, using shadows and cover to remain invisible, while gathering intelligence on her opponent's positions and movements. Morrison had positioned himself as the team leader, with Thompson and Rivera advancing down the main corridor while Walsh, Kowalski, and Barnes attempted to flank from the sides. It was a textbook maneuver for open terrain, but completely wrong for urban combat against a mobile opponent. Sarah struck first, catching Barnes separated from the main group as he tried to clear a side building. Her paintball round caught him center mass, eliminating him from the exercise before he even knew she was there. She was already moving to her next position before Barnes hit the ground. Contact.
She got Barnes.
Walsh's voice crackled over the radio, panic evident in his tone. Morrison tried to rally his remaining team members, but Sarah had already anticipated his response. As Thompson and Rivera moved to support Walsh's position, she circled behind them through a route she had memorized during her preparation time. Her second target was Kowalski, who had positioned himself as Overwatch but failed to maintain proper situational awareness. 2 quick rounds eliminated Kowalski, leaving Morrison with only 4 Marines against an opponent who seemed to be everywhere at once. The watching crowd murmured appreciatively as they witnessed textbook special operations tactics being executed flawlessly. "This is impossible," Rivera shouted over the radio.
"She's like a damn ghost."
Morrison's team was beginning to panic, their carefully planned advance dissolving into chaos as Sarah picked them off one by one. Walsh fell next, caught in the open as he tried to relocate to a better position. Thompson lasted slightly longer, but his inexperience with urban combat tactics made him predictable, and Sarah eliminated him with a precision shot from an elevated position. That left Morrison and Rivera, both increasingly desperate as they realized their numerical advantage had completely evaporated. Morrison made the fatal mistake of trying to rush Sarah's flag position, abandoning the tactical patience that might have given him a chance. Sarah was waiting for him. She had positioned herself with perfect fields of fire, covering all approaches to her objective. And when Morrison broke cover for his assault, she eliminated him with 3 quick rounds that would have been fatal hits in actual combat. Rivera, now alone and facing an opponent who had systematically destroyed his entire team, made the smart decision to surrender rather than continue a hopeless fight. The exercise was over. Sarah had achieved a decisive victory against 6 opponents without taking a single hit herself. The watching Marines erupted in amazed chatter, recognizing they had just witnessed something extraordinary. As Morrison and his crew gathered their gear in stunned silence, Sarah approached them one final time. Her expression was serious but not gloating as she addressed the group that had made her life miserable for so many months. "You asked me not to cry, and you wanted to see what I was really made of," she said quietly. "Now you know. I'm not your princess and I'm not your victim. I'm a Marine Raider, and I earned every bit of respect that comes with it." Morrison looked up at her, his face a mixture of shame, anger, and something that might have been the beginning of actual respect. "How?" he asked simply. "By focusing on becoming the best Marine I could be instead of wasting energy trying to tear down other people," Sarah replied. "You might want to try it sometime." As she walked away from the training facility, Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. The months of harassment were over, not because she had asked for mercy or sought protection, but because she had proven herself capable of handling any challenge that came her way. Behind her, Morrison and his friends sat in silence, finally understanding that they had never been dealing with a victim. They had been tormenting a warrior who was simply waiting for the right moment to show them exactly who they were messing with. The little girl they had called Princess had become something far more dangerous than any of them would ever be. An elite Marine Raider who had earned her place through blood, sweat, and unbreakable determination.